This video is a part of the One Musical Scene series organised by Nando I Movies. If you want to learn more about it, I recommend watching Nando's video on James Gunn and the use of music in his films, which also gives a rundown of the basic premise of these videos, to cover a scene focusing on its music. I participated last year in the One Villainous Scene series, and I'm happy to come back for another round. In this video, I'll be talking about my latest obsession, The Last of Us. Now, if you love the franchise like I do, I actually have a video in the works about the first game and its remake, which will talk about my feelings of the overall story and gameplay. This video, however, will specifically cover the music and how Ellie and Joel are connected through the sixth string. Now, to get this out of the way, I want to quickly talk about the soundtrack by Gustavo Santaolalla. The Last of Us and The Last of Us Part 2 have gorgeous and somber soundtracks. They can make it seem more tense with pieces like The Hunters and Eye for an Eye. They can pull you straight into the world with the incredible The Last of Us, which plays over the opening credits and you'll hear in the background now. And they can deliver a goddamn perfect send-off with The Path, A New Beginning, one of my personal favourite tracks. The real topic of this video is to delve into the relationship of Joel and Ellie, through the guitar, either via the music Ellie will play on it, or via its narrative significance. The Last of Us is a game all about sound. Clickers and bloaters have lost their sight, so must rely entirely on sound to hunt. Characters are constantly shushing each other and trying not to make a sound. Yet when the fighting erupts, it's the sound that takes over. Shouting of human enemies, the wretched cries of the infected. Bullets make loads of noise when fired, and the sound they make upon impact is satisfying as all hell. Then there's music. We find out early on that Joel has at least some interest in music. We see guitars and records in his home, showing that Joel loves music enough to invest in it still, despite his clear financial struggles. One of the first connections between Joel and Ellie, and even Ellie and the player, is when Ellie wants to learn how to whistle. When she finally learns, Joel jokingly remarks that it's just something else she can annoy him with. After leaving Bill's, Ellie reveals she stole a cassette, and the two begin to listen to it together, leading to a great use of music in an action scene with the Hunter's ambush. The music turns from background noise to the forefront of our ears. The biggest moment from the first game is when Joel admits to Ellie that he wanted to be a singer. This shows that the walls between the two have almost finally broken down. Joel's love of music endears him to Ellie. Joel, however, refuses to sing for Ellie, showing that he's still guarded. This is paralleled later in the same level when Ellie mentions Joel's daughter, Sarah, and he doesn't push back initially. It is only once again when Ellie begins to bond with Joel, the subject turns to his wife, and his walls go straight back up. Then once they've escaped from David and his crew and arrived in Salt Lake City, Ellie is drifting. She clearly has some trauma from what happened and is struggling to connect with Joel. Joel now speaks to Ellie more openly about teaching her to play guitar, but she isn't listening. At this point in the game, Joel has developed somewhat of a dependency on Ellie. He even suggests leaving this whole thing behind and going back to Jackson. We all know how The Last of Us ends. Joel kills the Fireflies to save Ellie. He returns to Jackson, having lied to her, and once again Gustavo Santaolalla ends on a beautiful note as the credits roll. By the end of the game, Ellie has changed Joel. She's mellowed him. Joel no longer feels this rage, this anger, this constant sense of danger and protection. Joel finally feels human again. And a lot of this has to do with how he feels about music, how he connects to Ellie through music, through the guitar, through the whistling, through the tape. But there's something more sinister to these closing moments. The way Joel lies to Ellie, it's unnatural. It's kind of haunting, actually. Really, they've connected, but now Joel's less honest than he's ever been before. He's connecting with Ellie, through his past, his memories, his music, even somewhat believing her to be his new daughter. It's somewhat concerning, really. But with all the Fireflies dead, and Ellie and Joel back together, that's where we leave The Last of Us. And enter Part 2. Now, 3 quick things that I feel are important to get out of the way. 1. I love The Last of Us Part 2. It is a 7 out of 7, I think Abby rules. She's a great character, and I would love to talk about her. But, 2. To my understanding, Abby has no strong connections to music in the Last of Us universe. The music during her sections of the game is also incredible, but she doesn't have the link or connection like Joel and Ellie do. Speaking of which, yep, Abby killed Joel, spoiler and all. But, 3. I never felt this was much of an out-of-nowhere plot twist. Even before the leaks, the example I like to turn to is the E3 teaser from 2016 featuring Ashley Johnson's beautiful rendition of Through the Valley. When I first saw this trailer, I had always thought it indicated that Joel was dead, and this was some sort of ghost speaking to Ellie. But fortunately, with the context of part 2, I can dive into this even deeper. Now, as the camera pans down the street and into the house, neither Joel nor his horse are visible. As we follow Ellie playing the guitar and singing, we see a faded figure walk up to and through the door, through the house out of nowhere, as if Ellie's haunted singing brought back a dead man's soul to come speak to her. I truly believe this trailer is showing us what we would later see in the full game, that Ellie's connection to Joel after his death comes from his guitar, that her singing and plucking of the sixth string is what keeps him alive in her memories, untouched by rage and by vengeance. Now, often when Ellie plays the guitar throughout the game, it leads to a flashback, but we never flash back to the murderous, dangerous killer Joel. We flash back to him as a man, more mellow and soulful, having found a second chance at life in Ellie. Now, after the interpretation from the trailer is that Ellie is singing about herself, about killing her enemies, how she can't walk on the path of the right, because she knows she is in the wrong. While I believe in this interpretation, I believe more than anything else that Ellie, knowing it or most likely not, is singing about Joel. Let's break this down as much as I can with my very limited knowledge of the original song's meaning. The first verse of the song does seem to mimic Joel's feelings throughout The Last of Us. Joel, even walking through the Valley of Death, trusts himself, his mind, and his gun. The individual Joel believes in is not luck, it is not God. Joel believes in Joel. On top of this, Joel is also known to very easily kill his enemies. He has survived through many hardships, but almost always comes out on top. Joel doesn't believe he will kill his enemies, he knows he will. This may also help us reconcile his death at the hands of Abby. He never believed her to be his enemy up until it was too late. Joel, mellowed by Ellie, doesn't need to interrogate Abby or fear her, because he now believes in himself and that if Abby was a threat to him, she would be dead already. The second verse of this song is filled with self-affirmation. That despite the blood Joel has spilt, he may still believe he has done everything for the right reasons. This lines up with his declaration to Tess in the Capitol building, that they are survivors. However, Joel can't escape what Tess said, claiming they are shitty people and that it had been that way for a long time. This leads into the last two lines of the verse. Joel walked beside the still water, he walked with Ellie, and she restored his soul. But after what he did and how he lied to her, he knew he wasn't right. He was wrong. I've always believed that Joel was a ghost or memory in this trailer, but after playing the game I can say I believe for certain that this was all intentional. Okay, I know I got distracted, let's get back to part 2. As I mentioned before, Ellie uses Joel's guitar to connect him after Abby took him away from her. Ellie could not let Joel go, she couldn't lose him, so she hunts Abby and she kills so many people. I'm torn on Ellie in The Last of Us 2. Her characterization is great, maybe even too real for a video game. Ellie always acts exactly how I think she would, but not always how I think she should. The people she kills, the things she does. Personally, after finishing the game twice, I have to side with Abby for the most part. She isn't perfect, but I agree with her more. But Ellie does what she does. She hunts Abby, kills people, and in the end is forced to choose between a happy life with Dinah and her son, or kill Abby. Ellie doesn't even seem to hesitate. Even knowing what will happen to her and Dinah, she runs away to hunt Abby one last time. During their final confrontation, Ellie almost kills Abby until the memories of Joel rush back to her and she realizes that she can't do it. She seems to remember her last moment with Joel was a good memory and lets Abby go. When Ellie says to Abby that she can take him, it seems she is talking about Lev. But I and many other people smarter than me believe that she is really talking about Joel. Ellie is finally ready to let go and accept that Joel is gone. But you may ask, how is any of this related to music? Well, in that final confrontation, Abby bites off 2 of Ellie's fingers. When Ellie returns home, she finds that Dinah did exactly what she promised and has probably moved out of the house and back to Jackson. Ellie wanders around her empty home. Ironically, if she had just stayed at home, she would have lived a happy life and Abby would have died anyway. But Ellie's words to Abby in their confrontation as to why Ellie went after Abby reveal why she never would have been satisfied with this though. Ellie says, "I can't let you leave. I can't. I believe that this suggests Ellie isn't really in control here, and she is acting on her trauma and PTSD, which are informing her that the only way to end this for good is to kill Abby. In the end, she goes upstairs, picks up Joel's guitar, and tries to play. Abby has severed that connection, though. Ellie can't play anymore. She still flashes back to her and Joel's final conversation before coming back to reality, placing Joel's guitar down, and leaving. Now she has to finally let go. God, what a beautiful piece of art this game is. That's how I feel anyway. I know this game is divisive, and while I can never agree with people who hate it, I hope you know I respect your right to feel however you want. I just think with all of the pieces together, it makes a gorgeous tapestry. Also, before the video ends, the cover of Through the Valley has Ellie whistling in it, like from the first game, and I just thought that was really important to point out and bring full circle. Thank you for watching my video on a current fixation of mine, and thank you to Nando once again for hosting this event. It's a great excuse for me to actually make a proper video, so if you could just start doing this once a week, I'll eventually start a consistent schedule. Like I said earlier, I have a Last of Us video in the works that I'm very happy with so far, so if you would subscribe, and that will hopefully be up sometime before next August. Once again, thanks for watching and goodbye. Have a nice night or day or morning, and play The Last of Us Remastered, and The Last of Us Left Behind, and The Last of Us Part 2, and The Last of Us Part 1, and Uncharted 2, and Uncharted 3, and Uncharted 4, and Uncharted Lost Legacy.